the ball touched his feet. It was never only a game. For millions, it felt like something else was happening, as if a new religion was being born in real time. A small man with a heavy gaze and impossible balance turned grass into theater and turned crowds into believers. Diego Armando Maradona, the god of the green pitch, a name argued over, alongside Pelé, as the greatest footballer of all time. In 1986, one moment became eternal myth. The hand of God goal against England. The goal that didn't just win a match, but seemed to change the mood, the pride, the fate of a nation. Then came Naples, the poor city of southern Italy. Maradona didn't just play there. He carried it. He lifted Napoli, almost single-handedly, to the summit of Europe and made a city that felt ignored believe it was chosen. At the peak of his career, he was among the world's highest-paid athletes. In Napoli alone, he earned a $3 million salary. From sponsorships, he brought an income that approached an almost unbelievable $10 million. Brands laid millions at his feet to use his face. Stadiums chanted his name. Giant frescoes of him were painted on walls like saints in modern ink. He was not just a footballer, but a living legend, a symbol of rebellion, a global icon. But when the calendar read November 25th, 2020, those triumphs and those roars were nowhere to be found. No stadium choir, no trophies, no crowds, only death by heart attack at the age of 60. And then came the detail that stunned the world. Not because it was dramatic, but because it seemed impossible next to his fame. Maradona, who had earned tens of millions of dollars at the summit of football, who was one of the most recognizable faces on earth, closed his eyes to life with only £75,000 in his bank account. His close friend and journalist Luis Ventura described it with brutal simplicity. There was almost nothing left in his bank account. Maradona died poor. How does a global icon who earned astronomical sums, who had enormous brand value, and up here, his lawyer, Angelo Pisani, would later confess a truth that summed up everything in one sentence. A sentence that sounds unreal until you understand what happened behind the curtain. He said Maradona never had more than 100 euros in his pocket. This is not merely the tragic downfall of an athlete. This story is about properties scattered across the world, a vast fortune without real control, unpaid tax debts that never stopped chasing him, dark addictions, an inability to say no, and an entourage that, as people around him would later suggest, drank the legend's blood. After his death, the drama escalated into open warfare. An army of 16 people, consisting of his 5 officially recognized children, 7 children he allegedly never met, and 4 sisters, entered a battle over an inheritance estimated by some at $49.5 million. It was proof that success and money, when not managed correctly, can turn into hell. This is the untold anatomy of Diego Armando Maradona's financial collapse. The foundations of Maradona's financial destruction were laid during his brightest days. Between 1984 and 1991, while playing for Napoli, he won the club 2 Serie A championships and became the undisputed king of the city of Naples. Money flowed like water. Salaries, bonuses, and million-dollar sponsorship deals arrived one after another. Global brands like Puma and Coca-Cola were part of the machine around him. The world watched, and the world paid. But the flood of cash was never truly supported by professional wealth management, financial planning, or the kind of advisory structure designed to protect a person from their own momentum. In those brilliant years, a dark shadow entered his life and began to gnaw not only at his health, but also at his fortune and his ability to make decisions. Cocaine, alcohol, addiction. Years later, in 2014, at age 53, Maradona would voice the painful truth himself, not as rumor, not as interpretation, but as confession. He said that because of his illness, he gave his rivals a huge advantage. He asked people if they knew what kind of player he could have been if he hadn't taken drugs. He said he was 53, but because of the life he had lived, he felt like he was 78. even 80. Addiction didn't just rot his mind and body, it destroyed his financial control. A large part of what he earned poured into parties, luxury, and a growing army of people feeding off his fame. Experts often warn that the most dangerous recipe for elite athletes is not only temptation, but the combination of lots of money, excessive self-confidence, uneducated management, and a lack of professional oversight. Maradona became the most perfect and most painful victim of that recipe. Yet the biggest and most lasting blow to Maradona's wealth was not only drugs or parties. It was a tax nightmare from his Italy years, a long shadow that seemed determined never to leave him. During his time at Napoli in the late 1980s, he was accused of using shell companies in Liechtenstein when receiving payments for his personal image rights, and of evading legal taxes. From that point forward, the Italian treasury never left the legendary player alone. The debt spiral grew until it reached a number that sounded less like a bill and more like a sentence. With late interest and heavy penalties added on top of the principal, the claim reached 39 million euros, around 33 million pounds. Every time Maradona set foot in Italy, the state was on his heels. The pressure was not abstract. In past visits, tax police had seized even the 2 luxury Rolex watches on his wrist and the diamond earring in his ear. For someone worshipped as a saint in Naples, it was a public humiliation. Then came a moment that sounded like a scene written for cinema, but was reported as real. In 2013, while resting in a hotel room in Milan, officials from Italy's tax collection agency, Acquitting, knocked on his door and personally handed him the formal notice for the 39 million euro debt. Maradona always maintained he was innocent. He claimed that the real person responsible was a Napoli executive who never informed him about it and hid the tax notice from him. In an interview with the Italian press, in a resentful and wounded voice, he said that for 25 years they had been hunting him unjustly. He said he had harmed no one, that he had only given people love and a sporting spectacle. He said that even though he was innocent, they treated him like the worst criminal. And the most tragic part is that, in the end, he would be vindicated, but too late for it to repair the damage. In January 2024, 3 years after his death, Italy's Supreme Court concluded a legal battle that had lasted roughly 30 years and fully acquitted Diego Maradona of the tax evasion accusations. As his lawyer Angelo Pisani said, Maradona had never been a tax evader, and the decision finally placed what he called a tombstone over the pursuit Maradona had endured for decades. But for 30 years, the pressure itself had already done its work. Seizures placed on assets, accounts frozen, movement restricted, and the constant threat of enforcement. All of it became a cancer that ate away at Maradona's financial world from the inside. Even when someone has assets, the inability to access, structure, or protect them can turn wealth into a mirage. The world's best athletes often surround themselves with management teams made up of friends, acquaintances, or relatives who lack the proper education to manage complex wealth. The circle around Maradona, however, was described by those close to him as something darker, less a professional team and more an ecosystem feeding off his name. Throughout his football life, he earned tens of millions of dollars in salaries and bonuses as a player and coach. He signed major contracts granting permission for Konami to use his character in video games. It was even claimed that he earned 15 million pounds a year as honorary president of Dinamo Brest. Yet control over the money that came in was never truly in his hands. His lawyer Angelo Pisani summarized the collapse with words that cut through the mythology and land on something painfully human. He said Maradona lived beyond his means, and he was very generous. He said if you want to know where his money went, talk to the people around him who used him. Journalist Luis Ventura stated that the erosion came mainly from uncontrolled spending. Maradona paid everyone's bill. He financed the luxury lives of dozens around him. And this is how a man who earned millions can reach the point where the bank balance at death is reported as only £75,000. not because of one catastrophic investment, but because of a lifetime of leakage. The dark hole created by an inability to say no, and a life lived far from professional financial planning. There may have been little cash in the bank, but throughout his life, Maradona carried the illusion of a vast, unmanageable asset base scattered across the world. According to legal documents and reports, his inheritance included cash in Switzerland, Dubai, and Buenos Aires, global real estate, and luxury vehicles. He had at least 5 properties in Argentina. In his garage sat a $360,000 Rolls-Royce Ghost and a $175,000 BMW i8. There was even an amphibious military tank, a Hunter Overcomer, gifted to him during a visit to Belarus. On his finger, he wore a massive diamond ring worth $360,000. Some sources put his net worth at the time of death at only $500,000, while other estimates suggested the total value of his assets could have been around $49.5 million. But the core problem was this: there was no liquid cash, only assets spread across the world, subject to different legal systems and different pressures. Without an integrated wealth management strategy and an asset protection plan, international distribution is not necessarily a blessing. It can become a time bomb, slow at first, then impossible to control. The true catastrophe, the pin that was pulled after his death, was a reality that surfaced in full detail only when it was too late to fix. Maradona did not have a valid will. He had drafted one in 2012, but 4 years later, in 2016, he canceled it and shelved it entirely. Dying without leaving clear legal direction behind would create an inheritance war hell. Under Argentine law, even if a person has no will, the inheritance must be divided equally among all of their children. But Maradona's situation was chaos, an unruled war. He had 5 children he officially acknowledged. After he died, at least 7 more people appeared saying, "I am Maradona's child." Among the names reported were 19-year-old Santiago Lara and 23-year-old Magali Gill, pursuing legal routes for DNA testing and paternity claims. Santiago Lara's lawyer even requested that Maradona's grave be opened to obtain a DNA sample. And it didn't end there. 4 of Maradona's sisters also entered the conflict, seeking a share of what some estimates described as a $49.5 million inheritance. In total, at least 16 people became part of a relentless battle to claim pieces of Maradona's fortune. One Argentine source summarized the situation with a line that sounded like a prophecy. "This war for Maradona's money won't be a race. It will be a World Cup." The officially recognized children, who had been part of his life for years, saw it as a deep injustice to be forced to share equally with people he had allegedly never even met. Buenos Aires lawyer Elias Kirchhoff noted the inheritance process would be total chaos and would take years to resolve. Amid this chaos, the most humiliating moment came in December 2021, Maradona's inheritance. The material remains of one of the greatest football legends in the world was put up for sale, piece by piece, in an online auction to pay accumulated debts. With the agreement of the judiciary and the consent of the heirs, 87 items were offered. Ties he wore, a cigar collection, homes, 2 BMW cars valued at $225,000 and $165,000, a $38,000 Hyundai truck. The listed prices range from 44 euros to 800,000 euros. The ties of a man who once signed sponsorship deals worth nearly $10 million, now waiting for buyers for 44 euros. All proceeds would be used to pay debts. The magnificent journey that began at the top of the world ended in a virtual auction hall, selling personal items to cover what had piled up behind the scenes. After his death, his eldest daughter Dalma wrote him an emotional letter. She said that half of her heart went with him, but with her half heart, she would keep resisting, and she would defend him until the end of her life. For his daughters, he was the best father in the world. For Naples, an untouchable saint. For Argentina, an undisputed national hero. Yet Maradona's story became one of the clearest and most painful proofs that godlike talent on the pitch is not enough to protect a person's life and wealth off it. The lessons drawn by professional wealth management experts are stark. The absence of a will, financial mismanagement, lack of debt planning, and failure to properly organize international assets can leave a family not peace, but chaos and destruction. No matter how rich the person once was, a person must build the future not only with talent, but with mind, discipline, and structure. Genius on the field cannot cover financial ignorance or uncontrolled generosity. Fame and charisma cannot replace management skill in the business world. As long as the people around you are in love with the money in your account, they stay. When that account dries up, they can leave you alone with the final numbers: £75,000. Massive debts, scattered assets, and a family torn into legal factions. As in sports, so in life, the final score is written when the clock hits zero. And unfortunately, most stars never learn how to play that final quarter. Diego Armando Maradona showed the world, when he played with the ball, that miracles truly exist. He gave hope to millions and turned football into art. But in the last quarter of his life, as a victim of an uncontrolled lifestyle, addictions, an untrustworthy entourage, and bad financial decisions, he left behind a painful legacy that must not be forgotten. Wealth becomes a blessing passed down through generations only when it is managed with intelligence, discipline, and the right professionals. Otherwise, even if you have enormous houses, luxury cars, and diamond rings, you can leave the stage of life with nothing but €100 in your pocket and a chaotic inheritance war of 16 people tearing your family apart. He was the god of football, yet he left as one of the most vulnerable prisoners of the financial world.